This makes me sad. When you read 60 plus books in a year, you're bound to have some duds, unfortunately. If you have not watched my video that I recently did on my top 10 books of 2022, go check that out first. Get the good stuff out of the way first, and then you can come and watch this one and see which ones I was disappointed by in 2022. So before we get to the list, make sure you like and subscribe, share with your friends, all that good stuff. I'd love to have you support me in that way if you enjoy my content. And we're going to go ahead and get right to the list. I am going to start with a DNF. I wanted to put the DNF right up front. I really don't rate my DNFs usually because I never finished the book, but it was very disappointing to me that this happened, and that was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I was in really high hopes to enjoy this book because the movie Cloud Atlas is one of my favorite movies. It's a 3-hour movie, so you have to really consciously want to watch it, sit there, watch the story, and see how it unfolds. But it's just a phenomenal movie. Tom Hanks stars in it. I think it's Halle Berry, and there's a couple of other main characters as well. And it just flows, and it's wonderfully done. And so I was going into the book expecting more than I got, and I'll be honest, guys. I found the first couple sections of the book, because it's broken up into like 6 sections, I believe. I found the first couple of sections almost unreadable, and by the end of section 2, I'm like, I'm just gonna stop. This is obviously going nowhere for me. So I heard it gets better, but I really don't care. I was done, and I'm not gonna go back and give it another shot. I really don't want to. So Cloud Atlas was definitely a disappointing read for me. So that comes in at number 7. Number 6 is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I was very disappointed in this book. I knew going into it that it was not going to be the typical pop culture version of Frankenstein. I knew that. That was a given. I'd heard that in reviews and everything like that. There was a movie made of it back in the early 2000s with Kenneth Branagh that was supposedly closer to the book, and I did see the movie, and it was quite a good movie, but the book just did not do it for me. I mean, there were elements of it that were really cool. There was a long dialogue in the middle of the book where Frankenstein's monster tells the tale of how he came to learn English and to grow his intellect and learn all these things and pick himself out of the doldrums that he was in of being this wild feral creature to being what he considered himself to be an upstanding citizen of society. And just to see how everything transpired for him was really kind of cool. But the majority of the tale was just kind of forgettable, to be honest. I appreciate it for its place in history. I have a high respect for Mary Shelley for what she created, but it just wasn't for me. Okay, so that's my number 6. Number 5 is The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. I really have loved everything I've read up to this point from Thich Nhat Hanh, and interviews I've seen with him and teachings he's given. And he is just a phenomenal individual, and he lived an absolutely magnificent life up until his death recently. I just have an enormous respect for the guy. So going into The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, I thought it would really be kind of more of the same, one of those books that just inspires you to make changes in your life based on general philosophies of Buddhist teaching. That was not what I got. I got something that was very much a dialectical on the religious forms and teachings of Buddhism. You know, the pillars of Buddhism and the Eightfold Path, and I'm probably getting that wrong, but anyway, it was basically a religious manual for, I think, people who are wanting to follow a religious Buddhist path, and that is not me by any stretch of the imagination. So I appreciate it for the value that it brings so many in society, but it wasn't for me, and I was really disappointed by that. Number 4 is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This was an okay read for me. I was hoping it would be better than it was. It is hailed by many as a classic of science fiction and dystopian literature. There are heavy amounts of free thought philosophy that are peppered throughout the story. It's very much an allegory of sorts. I loved all of the philosophies that he was promoting in the book, and I really got a lot out of those, but the story itself was really very weak and watered down, I guess you might say. There just wasn't a lot of substance to the story itself. But if you take out the philosophies of someone who is trying to reshape society in a way that gives people freedom over their own bodies and their minds and things like that, it's a really great read. It was a very interesting book, especially in terms of sexual freedom. There was a heavy emphasis on sexual freedom in the book, which I thought was quite interesting and very well played out. But overall, the book itself was not great, so I just kind of disappointed by that. My number 3 disappointment of 2022 was The Haunting of Hill House. I had heard that it was very different than the miniseries on Netflix, so I knew that going into it. It's my first time reading it. I knew it would be different, but I thought it would at least be equally as spooky and kind of edge of your seat, things that were happening in Hill House, because it's a haunted house. You want spooky and scary things to happen, and I was actually kind of bored. Honestly, it was not anything like what I expected. It really didn't grab me. It wasn't engaging at all, with the exception of a couple of scenes and a couple of the characters. And the ending was just stupid, in my opinion. I did not like the ending, if you can even call it an ending. That's my personal opinion. But for a classic horror novel, I was expecting more. So yeah, that was my number 3. My number 2 disappointment of 2022 is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I wanted to like this book. I'd heard so many good things, and I was warned before reading it that Cormac McCarthy's writing style and voice is very, very different than your standard fiction author. So I knew that going into it, not a problem. I can read writers like that, not a big issue. But it was just, the dialogue was atrocious. The story was just rather boring. The main character was the atmosphere, and the atmosphere was really beautiful and fairly well described. But that's about all I can give the book, and I'm really disappointed that it wasn't better for me. So yeah, I wouldn't read it again, and I probably won't read anything by Cormac McCarthy going forward. And my number 1 disappointment of 2022 was Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe. I think out of all the books on this list, I was most disappointed by this, because this is hailed as a must-read of science fiction and fantasy literature. It got I think it was called the Tolkien Award or something like that. It's some big prestigious fantasy award. It's hailed as a modern Tolkien and stuff like that. And I'm like, there is no way that that is even remotely close to Tolkien's mastery. I was just blown away by that. But it was it follows our main character Severian, who is narrating a memoir of sorts of how he became the torturer that he is today, and just really not a great character at all. The first few chapters of the book, I was really engaged. I thought it was quite interesting seeing him grow up under the auspices of the Torturers Guild and things like that. As the book went on, it just kept getting worse and worse and really boring. And honestly, the way that Severian treats women in the book is rather atrocious. And it doesn't get better. It actually gets worse by the time you get to the end of the book. And it's actually two books. It's Shadow of the Torturer and Claw of the Conciliator, and they're wrapped up into one volume, Shadow and Claw. By the time I got to the end of the story, I was like so disappointed that I wasted my time reading that book. And I wanted to like it so bad. I mean, the cover art is magnificent. The blurb makes it sound like something that would just really be a great story, but it's not. In my personal opinion, it's not. I know a lot of people love it, and that's totally fine. If you love it, that's totally fine. It just wasn't for me. And I'm really sad about that because I wanted to like that book so much. So that's it, guys. Those are my top 7 disappointments of 2022. What were some of yours? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure that you join my Discord if you would like to engage with me more on a regular basis. That's where you can do that. I have a lot of different channels in my server that you can join and talk about books and make new friends, and it's just a great place. I hope you'll check that out. Until next time, make sure you are reading more books. We'll talk then.